3 game wardens put on full camouflage suits, parked in a nearby cul-de-sac, wandered straight into his property, past his no trespassing signs, stole a surveillance camera from his property, and have since been using that camera to retroactively spy on him.
Anyone who's watched an episode of Law and Order probably knows that police are supposed to get a warrant before they search your home. And that's rooted in the Fourth Amendment's protection against unreasonable searches and seizures. But anyone who's watched an episode of Cops knows that sometimes police don't follow the Constitution. And that's what's going on in one of IJ's latest cases. We're challenging a group of fish and wildlife officers that feel like they're above the law. I'm joined by my colleague Josh Wyndham, who's filed the lawsuit. Okay, so explain to me what's going on in this case.
It's outrageous. We have a client with a 30-acre residential property southeast of Richmond, Virginia. He has no trespassing signs surrounding the property, but in April of 2023, 3 game wardens put on full camouflage suits, parked in a nearby cul-de-sac, wandered straight into his property, past his no trespassing signs, stole a surveillance camera from his property, and have since been using that camera to retroactively spy on him.
So they didn't put their own surveillance cameras up. They literally stole his cameras and are using his own property against him.
That's right. And they didn't have his consent. They didn't have a warrant. They didn't even make any attempt to contact him on this day.
And how did he figure this out?
So he figured it out because his wife and 6-year-old son were playing basketball in the yard near his house. And his wife went to go get the ball, which had rolled away, and she looked up and saw a camouflaged man walking around in their woods. And so naturally, she was afraid. She took the son, she walked inside, and she told Josh, who was in the shower, that there was a strange man in their woods. And so Josh went outside, looked around, didn't see anybody. The officers had left, but he noticed that his camera was missing from his field.
There used to be a camera here, and when I came out here in the afternoon on April 8th, it was gone. Didn't know what happened to it for a while, and I ended up calling the police to report it stolen.
And the local sheriff's office responded the next day and said, in fact, the camera is not stolen. The game wardens have it.
So it was stolen by a government official without a warrant.
That's exactly right.
And so what did they do with the camera once they had it?
So they opened the camera, they took out the SIM card, they downloaded photos from the camera, and they've been sifting through those photos in order to try to find some reason to cite him for a hunting offense.
And there's just nothing that he's doing that's illegal, right?
No, Josh Highlander has never been cited or even accused of committing a hunting offense. And to our knowledge, he's not committed one here.
So what do you think it is that these fish and wildlife officials sort of seems to feel like as if they're above the law?
Well, for about 100 years, the U.S. Supreme Court has said that private land gets essentially zero protection from warrantless searches. So when we say private land, I'm talking about things outside what we call the curtilage of your house.
Right.
And curtilage is this kind of esoteric legal concept that really just means your yard. It's what normal Americans would call their yard. And so any real property that you own outside of that ring around your house, that's going to be unprotected by the Fourth Amendment, which means that police can enter, wander around for hours, take videos, take photos, dig up soil samples maybe. In fact, they're doing that in other cases that we're litigating.
No person at all in this country should have limitless power. And it sure seems like they do. And it just makes you feel vulnerable. It makes you feel anxious. It makes you feel like somebody's watching you on your own private property.
It seems like this flies in the face of what Americans think is actually going on with the Fourth Amendment, that a man or woman's home is their castle, and that extends all the way to their property line. And yet, we've litigated case after case where it's actually more like a couple of feet away from your home that you actually have some constitutional rights, and they all go away after that.
I mean, all of our clients in these cases, from Josh Highlander to our clients in our Tennessee and Pennsylvania open fields cases, which we can talk about, they're all outraged to learn that people are essentially wandering around their land, hiding in their bushes, spying on them. And I think that's right. Right. You should be outraged.
So talk to me a little bit about what we're trying to do legally, right? If the Supreme Court has said for 100 years that there's something to this, kind of what are we doing with these cases?
Right. So all of our open fields cases, including this new Virginia open fields case, are about state constitutional provisions and state constitutions providing greater protections than the U.S. Supreme Court has recognized under the Fourth Amendment. And to make a long story short, the U.S. Supreme Court's basis for the open fields doctrine has been the Fourth Amendment lists persons, houses, papers, and effects. And so none of those things are obviously the same as land. State constitutions often have different text. So in Pennsylvania and Tennessee, the word effects is replaced with the word possessions, and we say that includes private land.
Oh, yeah, because it's owned. You own it, you possess the land.
It's something you possess. I mean, think of, this is a bit in the weeds, but think of the concept in the law of adverse possession. You don't adversely possess, a purse or a handbag. Right. You adversely possess a piece of property.
Right.
In Virginia, there's a textual provision that mentions places. And of course, Josh's property is a place.
Right.
Now, all that said, we're just talking about searches and entries of land. The open fields doctrine has never extended to warrantless seizures of personal property on land. And so even under the federal open fields doctrine, even under the Fourth Amendment, what the game wardens did here by seizing Josh's camera was unconstitutional.
And that actually seems like it gets into a lot of the other cases that we litigate where people are seizing property from individuals, like completely regardless of whether it has to do with the Fourth Amendment violation. But so what do you think a person who owns a piece of land should do to protect themselves?
I mean, step one, every state has some version of a posting statute. And by that, I mean some way that you can legally designate your land as private and exclude trespassers. So in some states, that's as simple as put up a sign that says no trespassing at kind of regular intervals along the border. Josh Highlander has done that here. Some states have like paint laws, right? So purple or orange or yellow paint that you put on your trees to designate the same thing. So step one is take the steps that the statutory law recognizes as sufficient to exclude intruders. Beyond that, whether your land is going to be protected is often going to be a creature of whether your state constitution has meaningfully different language than the Fourth Amendment, at least according to what the U.S. Supreme Court has said right now.
So I actually own some land, and I actually have a game camera on it out in Washington. And is there anything I can do beyond that? Like, do I just have to get in touch with IJ if my camera goes missing?
If your camera goes missing, you should call IJ. I mean, one thing you might do, for example, is put a sign below the camera that says, this personal property is protected by the Fourth Amendment. Don't seize it, right? Of course, the point of game cameras is to keep them secret. So
Right.
you don't want people seeing your cameras, right?
I can see the deer going, what does this read say?
Exactly.
I'm confused.
Yeah.
So, all right, why don't you tell me where we're at with the other cases that we're litigating?
Yes. So in Tennessee open fields, we've got 2 clients with farm properties. They have no trespassing signs up on their properties. Game wardens repeatedly have gone onto their properties and done basically the same thing here, except for the camera seizure. They've gone on and wandered around, recorded footage, taken photos of my clients, that kind of thing. That case reached a trial court decision earlier, actually last year. In that case, a Tennessee trial court, a 3-judge panel actually, declared their warrantless entry authority unconstitutional under the Tennessee Constitution and said that possessions actually does include land, that term. And so the government has appealed in that case. And we have an argument on June 20th in the Tennessee Court of Appeals, and I'm thinking it'll be live streamed, so folks can probably tune into that. In Pennsylvania open fields, that is essentially the exact same case as Tennessee. The Pennsylvania Constitution uses the same language. It protects possessions. There's a similar kind of warrantless entry and patrolling power going on there. And so we've really brought the same challenge. The difference is that the Pennsylvania Supreme Court about a decade and a half ago said that the open fields doctrine is totally fine under our state constitution. And so our case is designed to get the Pennsylvania Supreme Court to overrule that case.
Cool. So this case is part of our project on the Fourth Amendment. Sort of explain to me what we're trying to do with that project.
So the basic idea of the project is that all Americans have a right to be secure in their persons and property from unreasonable searches and seizures. That's true under the Fourth Amendment. It's also true under virtually every state constitution. But the problem is that courts and government officers have basically invented ways to get around that protection in major realms of American life, from land to businesses to finances to personal data. And so what we're trying to do with the project is to close those loops point by point, piece after piece.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Justin.